It's actually a little bit underrated, don't you think that? They would look meh, and there is no wonder that you don't like them. Hi friends, welcome to the kitchen. As you can see from the title of this video is not going to be a recipe video, but rather we are going to touch on the topic of using oils, added oils in cooking. A lot of people struggle with cooking without oil, and that's pretty understandable. Part of it is due to the habit, part of it is due to the taste. So let's just dig in. I'm splitting this video into two parts, so I will add the timestamps down below. So if you find it helpful, just go to the second part. Why is it so hard to let go of those oils? Well, I guess one of the most obvious reasons and the most obvious answers is that it is easy. It is easy to cook with oil because oil acts as lubricant between your food and between the pan, the heated surface, so the food does not stick. And this speaks to the utility point of using oil. It's cheaper to buy a bottle of oil than it is to buy a good non-stick pan or a good stainless steel pan. But let's go beyond that. Oil is basically fat, and 1 gram of fat is higher in calorie content than both proteins and carbohydrates. In fact, 1 gram of fat yields around 9 calories, while 1 gram of protein and 1 gram of carbohydrate both yield around 4 calories. So oils are these calorie-dense food sources, but because they're stripped of the rest of the plant, they're also considered to be nutrient dilute. And this is one of the reasons why people in whole food plant-based communities are disregarding the oils or trying to move away from oils until the 21st century. There have been 4 basic taste modalities that were recognized by the scientific community. This is sweet, bitter, salty, and sour tastes. In 2002, umami flavor has been recognized as one of the other base taste modalities, and for the last couple of decades there have been discussions whether or not we actually have taste receptors for fat foods. And studies conducted in the recent years have indeed shown that us as humans can detect fatty acids of various lengths on our tongue, and I will link the research down below. It's actually quite a fascinating subject. We can detect fatty foods, and this plays to the habit of eating a high-fat diet. But not only that, fat in general and oils in particular are great flavor carriers. You can notice it when you cook meat. You can notice it when you cook spices. In oil is called the oil infusion for a reason, because oils are able to extract the flavors, the volatile aromatic compounds, from the seeds, from the leaves at high enough temperatures, and the oils, unlike water, are not evaporating as water does. Oils can burn, of course, which is not great for the flavor, but the boiling temperature of water, on the other hand, does not allow for the flavors to develop to the extent to which the oil helps those flavors to develop in other foods. This is why, for example, in Indian cuisine, in Thai cuisine, you will see a lot of aromatics and oil interaction in the cooking, and the aromatics, the whole spices are often added in the beginning of the cooking process, and oil is infused with them, thus making the whole dish more aromatic. And how we can address it without oil, we are going to talk about it in the next section of the video. One of the chemical reactions that is responsible for the flavor development of the foods, for the caramelization of onions and other kinds of products, is called the Maillard reaction, and it's happening between 140 and 160 degrees Celsius. And if you think about it, water evaporates at 100 degrees, so the water cannot keep up to this temperature that is needed to develop the brown, pretty color, which is also part of this reaction. And moreover, the flavor is not quite coming together. You might notice this when you cook your onions and you try to caramelize them. You just add water to the pan and the flavor doesn't kind of develop. It's all right if you don't want the overpowering flavor of onions, if you want to dilute the flavor a little bit, but if your purpose is to make them sweeter, to caramelize them a little bit, you will have to use a different approach. So now that we've talked about why for a little bit, let's move on to how. How do we actually cook stuff so it tastes good and it's also oil-free if this is one of your dietary concerns? You can use a no-oil sauteing technique if the heat is actually an issue and moist cooking methods are not allowing for the flavor to develop. One of the obvious answers is to use dry heat at high enough temperatures. I'm not going to go into the detail of how you can check whether or not your temperature is hot enough, but what you should probably know is if you're using a non-stick pan, non-stick pans typically can go up to the medium heat, so you might need longer times to develop the flavor. And what you would like is to heat up the surface of the pan on the high heat, so probably using stainless steel or some specific brand of non-stick pans which allow heating up the surface to a higher degree. You can invest in one of those. The two main methods for dry heat cooking is roasting without any oil and dry heat cooking on a pan. This can also be a combination method. When you apply dry heat to ingredients such as onions, you wait for them to brown a little bit, caramelize a little bit, and if you're not using a non-stick pan, it should start sticking to the pan slightly. Sticking to the pan is not always a bad thing. If you do not use this technique with onions, with garlic, with other aromatics, you will not have the development of the flavor profile to the extent that you will get with the dry heat method. Roasting is one of those other methods that you can use without adding any oil. It works perfectly fine with root vegetables, with cauliflower, with broccoli, any other vegetable. You can cook many of them inside the oven, and I will insert the screenshot of cooking times somewhere around here. The smaller the piece, the higher the cooking temperature should be. You would like it to brown and to cook at the same time on the inside. One important thing to know using dry heat cooking methods is that your vegetables should fry or should be baked, should brown, rather than they should be steamed. As you might know by now, steaming does not lead to any browning of your product. By that, I mean that your pan, your baking sheet should be dry, as well as the products should be dry enough. You can, however, use a little bit of water, of vinegar when you try to cook, let's say, your onions in the oven, or let's say you're baking an apple. You can add a little bit of water here and there or glaze your onions with some vinegar, but you should make sure that it's not excessive. I guess it takes practice, but you should see that the water is not dripping from it. It's just lightly coated with water or with the glazing mixture, which can also be used for the spices to stick on it a little bit better, so the vegetables bake and roast rather than steam. Using spices with oils is great. You can make really nice infusions, but if you want to minimize your oil consumption, there is still a way to develop more flavor from those spices. One of the ways would be to use whole spices and grind them as you cook. Use a pestle and mortar, or if you have a food processor with a separate attachment for grinding smaller objects like nuts and spices as well, you can use those. If you do that, you would notice that the whole spice does not share a lot of flavor with you, but once you start grinding them, all the flavors come out. This also is one of the reasons why you can prefer buying whole spices instead of ground spices. But if you're buying both, I don't say that you need to throw all your spices out. If you're buying both, you should know the differences. If you want to cook it without oil still, do grind it and do add it onto a hot surface in the beginning of the cooking process. This will allow the spice to develop flavor for a little bit longer, and you will extract a little bit more flavor here and there for each of the spices throughout the cooking process. Toast them lightly while you're cooking, and you will start feeling the aroma filling your kitchen. Then you can start adding your aromatics like onion, like garlic, and then you can deglaze the pan for this whole aromatic mixture to be flavorful and very fragrant. But what about the ground spices? Just don't stock them up in your cupboard for your grandchildren to use them. Add them in the end of the cooking process. This is where they start playing around with other flavors. This principle also applies to delicate herbs, think basil, parsley, mint. If you're cooking something with rosemary, tarragon, oregano, you can apply the whole spices rules to them and use them in the beginning or the middle of the cooking process because their leaves are sturdier and they do not release flavor as easily. Basil, on the other hand, once you start cutting it, you will start feeling those volatile flavors and molecules evaporate. The flavor gets very distinct and it's really easy to kill it with the heat. So if you add it in the middle of the process, that's not gonna do much to your dish. So those are the main things that I can think of how you can ameliorate the disadvantages of cooking without oil. But there is another thing that I would like to touch on. I think that cooking vegetables with moist heat methods such as steaming and parboiling is actually a little bit underrated, don't you think that? I think this is one due to the lack of flavor or perceived lack of flavor, which happens because probably the ingredients are not the freshest. It is true that when you're steaming vegetables, you're not going to get a lot of flavor development, but you're just going to make whatever is available in there a little bit more accessible for eating it. With vegetables and steaming, it takes 1 minute to ruin the whole thing and go from perfectly cooked to overcooked where you would not enjoy it as much. They would look meh, and there is no wonder that you don't like them. Steaming your vegetables correctly will help you preserve your flavor, and then you can add additional flavor onto it by using a vinaigrette or some kind of a sauce. And I have a couple of sauce recipes on this channel, so if you're interested, please go check them out. I will link them down below. Which brings me to my next point, is having some tools available for you like steaming basket, like an Instant Pot, is a very good investment for you in the long term if you're taking your diet seriously and if you want to cook a little bit more at home. Investing in a programmable pressure cooker, the NutriCook, for me was one of the best decisions in my cooking journey, and I never regretted it. I do have to mention that added oils is not the same as fat-free. You can still get a lot of good and bad fats from other products, so you do have to consider the product that you're eating. One of the reasons I personally try to use less oils, and you can see earlier videos on my channel where I'm using oils and I'm saying that I'm not afraid of them. And I'm not afraid of them, but what I've noticed personally is that reducing added oils consumption do help me with weight management because those calories go in almost unnoticeably. 1 tablespoon of olive oil and most of other oils have around 120 calories, and this is just like 1 medium-sized sweet potato. So you get the idea, right? And I mean, it does have impact on my life personally. At the same time, I feel like we do have to recognize our personal and individual differences. This is not like a war against oils. They do have their time and place, but for many people, this would be something that they would like to cut out of their diet. So I hope this was helpful, and I hope this encouraged you to seek out the ways to make your cooking experience more fun, more diverse, and experiment with different textures and methods of cooking, which will be aligned with your dietary and health goals, which is why we're here, right? If you like this video, please give it a like. If you really feel like it, please do subscribe to the channel. This helps more than you know, and it costs virtually nothing, so I really do appreciate it. Check out some other videos. I'm going to link them down in the description box down below. And do remember to eat some greens today. They're generally good for you. Know what you eat, be healthy, be well, and I see you in the next video. Bye.